Got it. All right, we are recording, so that's a positive. That's better than the first one. Appreciate everybody jumping in. You can start firing away questions. I'll just start talking for a second as well. As I reported yesterday, Houston Roth questionable per Mike Bianco for this weekend. I don't really expect him to play just from what I've heard, so we'll see. But I think Doug Nikhazy is probably the most likely to go Tuesday if he doesn't go. But we'll see. You know, it's that deal where, as we said on the podcast this morning, in some ways I think it's almost kind of beneficial, as dumb as that sounds. I know it sounds really, really Pollyanna, but it's not a deal where it's a long-term deal. It's not a long-term deal. It's not going to hurt him more once he comes back. He can't re-aggravate it just because of this. I hit record. We're all good. We are recording. So, yeah, I'm not overly worried about Houston, but again, availability very limited, probably out this weekend. The shirt is Golf Club of Tennessee. Played that Vanderbilt weekend. Weather, look, let's go ahead and start this from the beginning. Mike Bianco is one to wait this thing out as long as possible. You're not likely going to get tons of weather updates really early in the day, way before first pitch starts, because a couple different reasons. Number one, they hardly ever get rained out. I know knock on wood or whatever, but they really don't. They really don't. I got a quick question. Sorry. Anyway, yeah. Look, they normally play, and the field drains so well that they're going to wait it out, because if it stops within half an hour, you're playing baseball. So with the weather thing, don't freak out. However, tomorrow does not look good. Looks like we're really good Saturday. Looks like we're okay Sunday, but tomorrow is the rough day. But as of right now, they expect to play. They're going to expect to play until Mike Bianco decides they're not playing sometime around game time. If that's the case, they are not one to call it early, and that's because it typically works out. I had the stat last year that at least during SEC play, I think of all the home games in Mike's 18 years, they've had one SEC game rained out, and that was the last game of the 2015 season. Maybe it was Texas A&M. I think they were going to play a doubleheader, and they only got one in or something like that on the last weekend. So typically they get those games in. That's not a big deal. Somebody's asking about Twitch and ad supports and different things. We're over the follower number that I need. Basically, I've just got to keep streaming. There's a certain number that I've got to get to in the first month from an hour standpoint, and then I'm gonna get enough listeners because of you guys. I appreciate that, and I've got enough followers because of that. I've just got to kind of keep going, and we will be able to increase the experience for you guys once we get to those points with Twitch. Let's see. Closer if Parker struggles. Well, you know, that's what's funny about that, because I think that's why Houston Roth was not in the bullpen, or at least one of the reasons. Wasn't in the starting rotation, or at least one of the reasons is he was just as good as Zach Phillips through most of the spring. He was very, very right there. But I think that because of his experience in the bullpen, Mike knows that Houston can step back. He can be kind of that mentality guy at the back end of a bullpen if it's necessary. So I think at minimum he was going to be that Etheridge role, and then if something did happen with Parker and he did struggle for whatever reason, I think he could fill into that spot as well. So I think that's part of the reason with him out. You know, I don't know about right now, because you don't necessarily want to throw a freshman in that spot, but I love Caleb Hill's stuff. Now, he's a little all over the place at times, but he's got maybe the most live arm on the team. He coming from the left side, it's kind of all over the place, but man, it's dynamic. It moves around. It's electric. So down the road, I really kind of like maybe like Caleb Hill in one of those spots. So we'll see. But look, Caracci's got a long leash. His velocity was back up last weekend. I don't think that's a storyline at this point. I think some things would have to falter, and he would have to really, really struggle for us to get to that point for that question. Can Etheridge be a Friday night guy? Well, look, I said last week that I think there are three spots on this team that if you just want to nitpick, and it's nitpicking because they're a top 10, top 13 team in the country, whatever they are, I do think there's three areas. I'll reiterate those again. I think outfield defense is potentially below average relatively to the SEC, however you want to put it. I don't know what the depth looks like behind Cooper Johnson, even though I think it is possible Thomas Dillard catches some SEC games. And then it's, at least on paper, they don't have that frontline ace, the Pomeranz, the Wall, the Lynn, the whomever. But Etheridge, from a college production standpoint, I think can give you equal to what you need. Ole Miss's pitching staff is built on depth. It's all about depth. It's all about hitting. It's about just keep it in the game and let the lineup take the game over. So he doesn't have to be great. He can be every bit as good as Rollison last year, and that was good enough. They won how many ever games they won last season. They had potentially the best regular season in school history. So I think Etheridge can be good enough. I think he's gotten better. He showed up on campus to be a weekend starter. I mean, that's what he's been working toward. I think mentally he's going to be fresher. He's going to be in a little better place because he's finally in the role that really he envisioned for himself. So I think he's going to go into it with a good mentality tomorrow night. I'm kind of anxious to see him, and frankly, I'm kind of anxious to see this kid from Wright State while we're talking about it. I wrote about him yesterday, Bear Bellamy, because as I asked Aaron, if you didn't hear it, Aaron Pitt on Thursday's podcast, his numbers were atrocious last year. He was a midweek starter or a midweek pitcher for Wright State last year. He's a right-hander. His BAA was up 330, 333. His ERA was in the 7s. His whip was somewhere around 2, and he throws really hard. Well, if you're competing against Ole Miss, that's the worst profile imaginable, because if you're going to be kind of bad and you're going to pitch against Ole Miss and potentially do well against them, you want to be the lefty thumber. You want to kind of be able to mix so much off speed in there and keep them off balance. They hit really bad fastballs or hard fastballs with really bad movement on it. So from a betting standpoint, I mean, I don't know if there's a money line on this game, but from a betting standpoint, I'm kind of curious about Bellamy tomorrow because he's at least a profile of a pitcher that Ole Miss typically runs out of the yard. So I'm kind of curious what he looks like. He was up to 95 in the fall and the early spring, so he can really throw it. So if nothing else, from a fastball velocity standpoint, a pretty good test for Ole Miss tomorrow night. First guys out of the bullpen is relief this weekend. Well, because of Houston being hurt, I think we're looking at Doug Nikhazy, as I mentioned for Tuesday potentially as well, but definitely out of the bullpen. Left-hander, he's been really, really good. He came in with a lot less fanfare as a lot of other people, but he's been as good as anybody. I mean, maybe as good as Hoagland for the majority of when you look at the fall and the spring. Nikhazy came back from Christmas. I think he had a little bit of tenderness. He wasn't as good right at the beginning of the preseason of the spring, but overall he's been fantastic. I don't think that's a worry. I'm kind of curious to see him as well there. So I think it's him, it's Chofie, it's Gracie, it's the people you know. I mean, he's going to go back to experience at least early on, except for Nikhazy. I think he really wants to get Nikhazy and he really wants to get Hill in games early on just to see what they have. Chances Ole Miss eventually puts premium seating somewhere in the outfield. I have not heard that at all, and because of my story on Monday, I've done a ton of stadium talk in the last few weeks, and I've not heard that at all. They don't want to do anything to mess up the experience and the atmosphere in the outfield. I know that 100%. You know, it's just like when they've kind of tightened up some rules at times and they've frankly enforced rules at times a little differently. That doesn't last long usually. It all kind of comes back to the mean of what you're kind of used to at Swayze Field, and they're going to do that because the atmosphere is the calling card. They're not going to screw that up. So I have not heard anything about more, any additional premium seating other than, of course, those top rows in left field are reserved however they are. But otherwise, no, I think it's as is. I don't see any changes. If so, it's unexpected, and frankly, it would be not very smart. I think they've got a really good thing going, and there's no reason to get there. Let's see. How do Ole Miss fans get more knowledgeable about the game of baseball? I'm not touching that one. Let's see. Tripping through questions. Am I going to watch any of Vanderbilt, Virginia tomorrow night? Any other matchups I'm anxious to see? I actually have not looked at the schedule yet. I was going to write something about that in the morning, so we'll get to that. Yeah, I mean, obviously Vanderbilt, Virginia is interesting, but mostly just to see Vanderbilt because Virginia's been, they haven't necessarily been themselves the last couple of years from an overall season standpoint. I'm not terribly interested in them, but I am really interested in Vanderbilt specifically. I'm really tongue-tied tonight. I promise I'm sober. Kumar Rocker, Tracy Rocker's son, as most people know, throws the crap out of it. Could have been drafted really, really high in the Major League draft. Had some side abilities issues, ends up at Vanderbilt. He's a stud on the mound, so I'm anxious to see him figure out what his role is going to be with Vanderbilt this season. So yeah, Vanderbilt, just because of their arms, just because of what they kind of have available, I'm interested in them because they're my pick to win the SEC simply because of that schedule and because of they miss LSU, they miss Ole Miss, and Florida plays everybody. We talked about that last week. Florida on the road this season, at Ole Miss, at Vanderbilt, at Georgia, and at LSU. So that murderer's row of a situation I don't like Florida in the regular season. I like them in the postseason, but I don't like them in the regular season. I think Vanderbilt walks off with the SEC East, and that allows them to walk off with the overall title because Ole Miss, LSU, Arkansas, those teams are going to beat up on each other a little bit. I don't see the West champion getting to 20 wins, so we'll see. But yeah, I like Vanderbilt a lot. I'm anxious to see them early to see what is going on there. How good is Wright State overall? Well, look, I mentioned Bellamy. They return a ton of guys offensively. They've got the Burdick kid that can really hit. Apparently, it's real. It's not just Horizon League real. But where I don't know how to gauge them is there's only 6 teams that play baseball in that conference, and it's a bad baseball conference. So yes, while they dominate the Horizon League, they were I think they were 7th or 8th nationally in runs scored last year. They scored right at 8 runs a game. They've got a lot of confidence. They've got a lot of guys back, and they're going to be able to hit. I mean, this is not a pushover weekend for Ole Miss whatsoever. But I don't necessarily want to crown them either. This is about Ole Miss. If Ole Miss plays well, they're going to win the weekend. But Wright State's kind of exactly that team you want to play. You're playing a northern team on the opening weekend that's not going to be sharp from a, hey, we've been out practicing every day and we're used to this and this and that, number one. Number two, I know they're from Ohio, but close enough. Number two, they're going to have a good RPI. I mentioned this in the story. I mentioned this with Aaron, too. They finished 69th in the RPI last year, and their schedule this year is better, and they've got almost all the offense back. So they're probably going to throw a top 75 RPI at you. So if you can get that on the opening weekend playing one of these kind of teams, that's a really good thing from a scheduling standpoint. So yeah, Wright State's a good team to play. The weekends are not overly interesting. I think Tulane's okay. Long Beach isn't very good this year, even though they're going to bring that style. They're going to test Ole Miss. That's a big weekend for Cooper Johnson. If you remember last year, Long Beach really got after the Ole Miss catchers in the game that Ole Miss lost. They stole a lot of bases. They frustrated Ole Miss a little bit, and Ole Miss had to kind of figure that out, had to react to that in a good way. So that's the thing with Long Beach. You're going to see a little different type of baseball. You're going to have to lock in on your fundamentals. But the midweek is what is more interesting than the non-conference weekends for Ole Miss because of Louisville, because of East Carolina, because of the Governor's Cup, and then because of the ongoing situations every year with fans and when they play Memphis and Southern Miss. Any idea when the game notes drop? They're probably out. I'll look. If not, I'll go to the little media section of the website. But as soon as I do see them, I can put those on the board. That's not a problem. Yeah, planning on doing the 3 outs videos again this year. I don't understand. I don't know why I wouldn't. If anything, my technology's a little better. I've learned some stuff from last year with that, so I think we can do that. What do I think about Keenan's slash line for the season? Do I think 330, 430, 670 is a realistic thing for him? I like 330. I think he hits 330. I really do. I think he's enough of a complete hitter. He's not going to chase too much. I think he hits for a pretty good average, but even though I'm not overly worried about average, and then 1,100 OPS. That's a big one. But yeah, it's realistic. I think that's possible for him. I really think Keenan and Dillard have huge years because, we're always asked that question, hey, whose stats would you like to have? I don't necessarily want Keenan's or Dillard's because I think I know what I'm going to get there. I think Dillard's going to have, given this era with this bat and this ball, I think it's going to be as good as almost anybody. I think he's still going to walk a ton. He's going to steal a lot of bases. He's going to do so many different things for Ole Miss to win games, and I think Keenan's going to benefit from that. The top of the order is so good that I think those two guys are really going to prosper. That's not somebody's stats that I'm overly interested in seeing. Gendle's been fine. Gendle has not been bad. The thing with him is that summer league, it's not bad, but it's not necessarily the Cape either, so I didn't know how it would translate. But no, Gendle's been fine. He's going to play. He's going to get an opportunity. They just couldn't take Elko out of the lineup tomorrow. Elko has hit his way into the lineup. He's hit his way into playing time, and you're going to see some battling there. But I think right now Mike really wants to just get as much offense in as possible and see where that goes. And Elko's a better athlete than maybe he gets credit for. Frankly, Cockrell kind of is too in the outfield, but Elko for sure. So, no, it's a competition. I mean, we're looking at Adams is still going to get a lot of time, even if Gray does play fairly early. And then Elko and Gendle are both going to play as well. So, let's see. Aaron described Wright State left-handed hitter as a donkey. Best backhanded compliment ever. Aaron uses that as the supreme compliment. That's one of his words. That is something he is quite fond of. Will Gray play this weekend? I don't know, I'll be honest. We'll see when the lineup gets put out tomorrow. When I left Tuesday, that's the last time I've seen anybody on the team, and I talked to Gray right before I left. I think I said this on the podcast. he had only at that point run straight ahead in the weight room. They've got like a little, I don't know if it's 40 yards or what, but a little mat thing down in the new weight room where he was able to run on that. But I don't think he had run outside. He had not run out of the box at all. He had done BP. He had hit. He had taken some ground balls, but he had not done everything that was needed to kind of say he was back. And there's no reason to rush it. That's the thing with Gray is that you've got Servideo, you've got Adams. Just put them there. It'll be okay. You need Gray healthy for the majority of the season more than you need Gray there for the first weekend. So if he's able to play, great, but make him be 100%. There's no reason to rush Gray Kessinger back to this lineup whatsoever. Do I have a feeling what the lineup will be 1 through 9? No, but we can play around with it. Let's take a shot. Let's say Gray plays just to make it easy. I'll go Gray, Olenek, Dillard, Keenan, Zabowski, Cockrell, Elko, Johnson, Servideo. I think that's 9. We'll go with that. We'll see how close we get tomorrow. If Gray does not play, I think Olenek leads off, and then I think you bump Servideo up somewhere and then put Adams at the bottom of the order is my guess. But if Gray plays, I think I'm probably pretty close to the order that Mike will go with tomorrow. We'll see. Should we expect any of these starting pitchers to work deeper? It was an issue last year. Etheridge has the ability. I think Will really can kind of go after guys. I think he relies on getting ahead so much that, especially only throwing once a weekend, when he knows, hey, just go out there and kind of, not max it out per pitch, but max it out for your outing. Because, the thing with Will was he struggled the second time on the weekend. But on the first time, he was really good. So I think he can go deep into games, and I think that's why you like him so much on Fridays. He might can preserve the bullpen a little bit, especially when we look at Saturday and Sunday and it being two guys who've never thrown in Division I before. Gunnar Hoagland on Sunday. I've mentioned this a couple different times that it's only the second true freshman that Mike's ever thrown on opening weekend of the season, Mark Holloman being the first one in 2003. And then Cody Satterwhite would have been in 2006, but there was a rain out. 2006 is that crazy year where Tommy Baumgartner, Nick Hetland, and Satterwhite started the first weekend of the year, and then at the end of the year you had Lynn Buckvich and I guess Klein. Now that I think about it, was the other one. So you had a complete overhaul of that pitching staff in 2006. So yeah, I think they can work deeper. I mean, Gunnar by just his stuff can potentially work deeper if he has the kind of the arm ability, just because he doesn't walk anybody. He got banged around a little last Saturday, but even in the fall and the spring, he's shown a lot of that control, a lot of that command that we knew from in high school. I mean, the first time any of us really heard about Gunnar Hoagland was when Jeff Passan had written about how he had not walked anybody his entire senior year of high school in the regular season. Gunnar told me later he'd only had 6 3-ball counts. And, I mean, I've said this before. I think that in some ways I thought, oh, that's a negative. It just meant, hey, I'm going to try to throw the ball by you. I'm going to just try to I'm going to know you can't beat me, so I don't care if you hit it. And I thought, well, is he going to get to college, freak out, and be a little too fine? But he hasn't done that. He's kept that mentality. He's kept that mindset, and he's pretty confident. So I'm pretty interested in Gunnar on Sunday. Gut feeling on final record. We'll go 18-12 in the SEC, and we'll go 20-6 in the non-league, 21-5, somewhere in there. That's a host site. That's definitely a host, and that has a chance to be a national seed as well. So we'll go somewhere in there. Maybe if I miss it by a game, I might be missing. I think I'm missing the league record, frankly, more than I'm missing the non-conference. I think just with the way things kind of shake out, though, I think there might become a little more regression back to the mean. I do think they'll lose more than one midweek game this year, just because that was kind of nuts last year. But yeah, it's a host team. I'm not worried about that. Let's see. Yeah, I mentioned Caleb Hill's role this year. Put him in the bullpen, see what happens. I do think he can end up being a midweek starter. I think that's kind of his max spot right now. But right now, it's put him in the bullpen, let him use that live arm, and then see if you need him in the midweek at any point, because he's a talent. He's really, really, really good. Anything less than a blank will be a disappointment this season. Anything less than a super regional. There's no doubt about it. This program has got to get back to a super regional, and you can't waste this signing class. You can have another thing happen that has happened 2 of the last 3 years where you're losing home regionals, And if you go on the road and lose a regional, then we're really talking about a negative for what is possible with this team and expectations. So, yeah, it's anything less than a super regional for this team this season. Who is the farthest home run of the year? Chase Cockrell has the most natural power. He does an excellent job of putting backspin on the baseball when he hits it. That's something that really can't even be taught. It just kind of happens. So I'm going to go with Chase Cockrell. I think he's going to hit some moonshots throughout the season. Greer Holston's role this year, he's got to kind of get back. He was banged up all of last season. He had moments, but he was not good consistently because of injuries. And Mike was asked about him on Tuesday, and he just frankly hasn't been very good. He hasn't been as good as a lot of these other guys we've talked about. As of right now, I don't know that he has a set role. I think they're going to look to some newcomers. I think even Taylor Broadway, another JUCO guy, could be somebody that could factor in as well. So yeah, I don't think Holston has that guaranteed role. Going into the year, or going into the fall, I guess, and into the offseason, I thought it would be the Etheridge role because I didn't know how Doug Nikhazy would come on. I thought Houston Roth was going to start as recently as maybe when they got back from Christmas as well, before Zach Phillips really came on. So I thought that would be Holston's role, but kind of the way things have shaken out, yeah, I don't think he has a set role. I think he's got to kind of figure that out. He's got to earn that back from what we were thinking at the end of last season. Let's see, what do we have? Fire any questions away. We've got a few more minutes. I'm not in a crazy hurry. We'll have some more coverage in the morning, by the way. We'll look at some schedule stuff the next couple days, even if it's not tomorrow. I usually kind of throw some non-conference capsules up at you to give you sort of an idea of what Ole Miss can expect non-conference RPI-wise. We'll look a little more at Wright State tomorrow as well, and then we'll look a little more at Will Etheridge as well. And I want to look at – I mentioned Barry Bellamy. I want to get some info on him. I want to see kind of what's caused his uptick in velocity. I want to see what the delivery looks like. So I'll have kind of an opponent pitching preview for you tomorrow afternoon as well on the site at rebelgrove.com. Let's see. Anything else? What do I think is a good season for Cooper Johnson at the plate? Well, I mean, let me start with this, even though I know you know it because that's why you asked that question that way. It's all about defense for Cooper. He's got to throw out runners. He's got to manage the pitching staff, and he's got to catch the baseball. I mean, that's the key for Cooper. The key for Cooper to play this year is to catch the baseball. Don't be so rigid as far as framing. Just catch it. Just kind of let your talent take over. And he was better with that in the summer. He had a great fall. He's more mature. Mike Bianco said that too. There's kind of a maturity uptick with Cooper, and it's the draft year. It's the year that he's kind of got to make it here. So I think that it's all about him for defense, but offensively, really just kind of get on base. He's not going to hit home runs. He's not going to hit for some high average, but just don't hit into double plays. Move runners. Get some hits. Just don't do anything crazy. I think anything without tons of strikeouts, frankly, is a good year offensively for Cooper Johnson. That's not why he's here. That's not why he is he's playing. So yeah, it's all about defense. Basically, here's what's a good season for Cooper Johnson offensively is don't let it affect your defense. Be good enough offensively that you're playing defense at a high level, because there have been times in the past where he's let one bleed over and affect the other. So he just can't do that. As long as his defense stays secure, it's not a big deal. Let's see. Dillard over or under 15 home runs and 15 stolen bases. I'll go just under on home runs and over on stolen bases. I think he steals 20 bases. I don't know about home runs. I mean, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, somewhere in that ballpark. Do I think this is the series they win in Baton Rouge? Well, they've got the talent. LSU's pretty good too. Until they do it, I'm not predicting it. It's been since 1982, so I'm not going there. I'm not going to go out on that limb, but should be a series that decides the West, and we'll be there. We'll all be there and follow it live. I'm planning on going to LSU, going to Tulane next weekend, going to Louisville, going to LSU, and then kind of just see past that. I know Neil's going to Arkansas because of Campbell, so he's going to cover that series in Fayetteville. Considering his record, that's probably great for everybody. They'll probably go sweep the Hogs with Mr. McCready up there. What do I think of Fowler going forward? He's had a better spring. He wasn't very good in the summer in the Cape. He wasn't good in the fall. He's been better this spring, but he's kind of like Holston. I think he just sort of lost a role. He was right there. He went in as the incumbent to really get a spot going and just wasn't very good. And that's okay. That happens. You see some regression sometimes out of those second-year guys, but yeah, he's got to get it back. I don't know. I don't know what his role is. I think in best case, he figures it out in the bullpen, and then once this thing sort of shakes out, he potentially takes back over that midweek role to gain some little more confidence, and you just kind of see where it goes. I mean, he spent 3/4 of the year last year in the bullpen and in midweek things before he became a huge asset down the stretch in the postseason. So there's time to figure it out before it's over. But as of right now, I kind of put him in that Holston category. I think those two guys, just from a standpoint of the roles that we thought they had going in and the roles they have now, I think they're the two biggest, I hate to say losers, but you know what I mean. They've regressed the most from what we expected after last season. And frankly, it's a credit to Ole Miss's signing class because you got Phillips and you got Nikhazy and you've got Hoagland, those kind of guys taking their spots and kind of going up and challenging them and winning spots in the rotation, and then probably in the midweek as well with Roth being injured. The number 2 closer is Houston Roth, in my opinion, just my opinion, but I think that's the truth. And I think it's a deal where he's back healthy before we would be into a conversation, even hypothetically, of Caracci losing his spot. So I'm going to stick with Roth. I just don't think there's much of a reason to go beyond that right now because I do think he would be the next guy up. Yeah, they're going to – I mean, I don't know that they're limiting Caracci's innings, but I think that's a good idea. I think that he's much more effective at 93, 94 than he would be at 90, 91 like most pitchers, so I think that's a good idea, but we'll see. I mean, Ole Miss has the depth to do that. I mean, it's sort of the good problem and the bad problem, if you will, for Mike Bianco is that he's got the arms, but he's got to kind of figure out how to keep every one of them fresh, but then use all of them at the same time. So it's one of the deeper staffs Mike's had, and he's got to manage in that way. He's got to make sure he really kind of pushes the right buttons on which pitchers to use and how often to use them because he's got a way to keep everybody kind of fresh even through the postseason. There's enough arms for that. I'm not worried about Ole Miss's arms from a depth standpoint. How far do I think this team makes it in the postseason? I do think they win a regional. I think they get into a super regional, and we'll see. I kind of hate predicting back that because it's one weekend, but yeah, I do think they finally get that next monkey and they get back to a super regional for the first time since 2014 and the second time since 2009. Is Caracci's command good enough for him to have success working at a lower average velocity? If not, what options does he have almost in the back end? Second part I've answered before, and first parts he does, but I don't know that he does as consistently as Ole Miss usually uses one closer, if that makes sense. Yeah, he can go out and get outs at a lower clip, but I mean we see that even in the spring a little bit. He's been banged up a little bit when that velocity does go down. So I think he as much as anybody does need a little more uptick there in velocity. Let's see. Does Ole Miss pitch to Mangum this year? He's batting like 900 against the Rebels. Yeah, they're going to throw a pitch to Mangum at some point. I think they will definitely walk him as well, though. So we'll be having these conversations because, yeah, Jake Mangum, it's that deal where, Ole Miss did it and another guy beat him last year, but I still maintain that's the way to go. You just can't not let him beat you when Ole Miss plays Mississippi State this season. Let's see. Newcomer of the year. Well, Zach Phillips. I think if you said freshman of the year, I would have had to have probably said Hoagland, but I would have contemplated Nikhazy. But we'll go with Zach Phillips. I think I think Zach Phillips sticks in the rotation. I like his 3-pitch mix. I like his confidence. I like that he does come from JUCO and has transitioned well because we always talk about how a lot of times those junior college pitchers take just as long as the freshmen to kind of adapt, and then sometimes you only get 1 year out of them. But with Phillips, I really, really like his stuff. Early on, maybe I comp him to Matt Krause. Maybe he's a good comp for Phillips, the guy that wasn't a very good Ole Miss team but did a good job on Friday night. So if Ole Miss gets that kind of production on a Saturday, they'll be in really good shape. That's without seeing him pitch in a game. I mean, if he gets bombed, never mind. But as of right now, I think that that Phillips is kind of a Matt Krause, and I think he's a guy that can spin multiple pitches. I think he can work deep into games potentially, and I think he could have a really good year. At the next level, he might even become a reliever. He's kind of slender. He's not a big guy. Scouts don't necessarily like his frame, but I think at the college level, he can be a very, very effective starter because you're not asking for tons of wear and tear. He can last 14, 15, 16 weeks without an issue for Ole Miss this season. Anything else as we kind of continue? let's see. Yeah, just a reminder, it's Arkansas State Tuesday, but the weather looks really bad then too. Weather looks as bad as anything tomorrow, and then Tuesday. Saturday, Sunday are pretty good. So if it rains all night and into game time tomorrow night, we'd probably face a doubleheader on Saturday. Since the game's at noon on Sunday, I'm assuming that's travel curfew is a guess. So I think they've got to make sure they get at least 2 in by the end of the day Saturday to get all 3 in, and they'll do that. I don't see any way we don't play 3 baseball games over the next 3 days, even if tomorrow doesn't happen. Couple more minutes. Anything else before we get out of here? I will tell you while I'm waiting for any further questions, we'll do another one of these Sunday night recapping the series. That's going to be kind of the set plan for the week, I think. I think every week we're going to try to do one on Sunday night, barring any kind of travel or anything. We'll recap, we'll look ahead, we'll just kind of chat, we'll pour a drink, we'll have a good time on Sunday nights. That's kind of the best time during baseball season to do this. And then I think we'll get to a point where we start using this for a lot more things too. Podcasts, we mentioned this last week. I don't know how close we are. We might be really, really close, and we might still be a little ways away. I think we might even do some watch events this way, where Neil and I use Twitch to watch some away games we don't travel to or something, where we all kind of have a dialogue together throughout the game. I think that'd be a good idea. I think we'd have a lot of fun with it. So that's sort of the next step in coverage as we figure out how to keep improving rebelgrove.com. So just some thoughts there as we move ahead. But we will do this on Sunday. Good crowd again tonight. I guess that's about it, because it's time to play games. You know, we've kind of previewed this to death. It's time to get going. So we'll come back. We'll cut this here. We'll come back Sunday night and do another one. So again, Ole Miss, Wright State tomorrow at 4, Saturday at 12, Sunday at 12 as well. And then we'll talk to you again on Sunday.